Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Tech Engineering Lounge. I'm your host, Camy and along with me, I've got James. James, do you
Hello.
want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I do. Hello, world. My name's James. Um, I am a engineering manager. I have a background in quality, as does Cami. So, quality engineering, quality testing, quality analysis. But here today to talk about engineering culture and drink tea.
Cool. So, yeah, I'm Kimmy. I'm currently working as a senior automation tester at Bank of New Zealand. I work with the bank as a contractor, but same as James, I do have a quality engineering background, with my expertise mostly being in front end automation. I have a bit of developer background as well. Like I started out as a developer. So for the first 3 years of my career, I was actually building mobile applications. So it was kind of like an easy transition moving into test automation. I think that's more than enough about us. People really don't want to hear us blabbering
No,
about
let's
us for
let's
like
let, let,
minutes.
let's talk about why we're here. So this is
Yeah,
the Tech Engineering Lounge, right? And the reason we've called it the lounge is that we want this to be a comfortable space, a safe space to sit and talk about some stuff about engineering culture, what it means, how to make it better, how to deal with some of the challenges that we face. I think, and Kevin, you might know better than I do, but both of us having a background in quality, something I've experienced over time is that a good engineering culture is one of the things that really drives that quality, and it's always a little bit sort of hidden. It's not always obvious that that's something that's going to affect the quality of your product, of your company, of your output. And so, um, I guess one of the reasons we want to start talking about this stuff and open up the Tech Engineering Lounge is to talk through how to build a better product and a better experience through a thriving engineering culture.
exactly. So I actually made notes. So I'm just gonna go through my notes.
Yeah, go. Tell me.
For me, it's Tech Engineering Lounge is our corner of the world where we talk about being a tech engineer, being in technology, engineering in general. But for me, it's mostly like I've tried breaking it down into three categories. So first one is the engineering practices, pretty much like what you said, like the culture, how you build a great engineering culture. And like you said, you never build quality in isolation. Quality is actually baked into the product using engineering practices, right? So for me, I just want to break down like what is an engineer, like what does an engineer being in technology means. Like, is it a dev engineer, a UX engineer, a data engineer, a release engineer, a DevOps engineer? There's so many sorts of engineers, right? So I like with the upcoming episodes, I want to break these things down, debunk these things down. And team culture, like a team culture for a platform team might look quite different to a team culture for a full stack team or a cross platform team. And it can be quite confusing. From my own personal experience of working in a platform team and working in a full stack team, it's quite mind boggling. Like, I'm not sure, James, do you have similar experiences?
I think one of the things we've talked about sort of in planning this is that no two cultures are alike, right? And so you can't, and one of the, excuse me, mistakes I see made a lot is that, oh, well, Spotify know what they're doing, so let's copy what they're doing and try and plug it in here into a context that, it's a different product, a different size team, a different cultural context. And so I think one of the things that we'll be covering as we sort of launch this series is, um, how to assess what your culture is like, what to keep, what to take away, and how to um, build a culture that is specific to the context you're working in and to make that work well. Of course, I think neither of us are experts. We're learning this as we go as well, but we've both got experiences to share, and we both know people who will come and share with us, some of their experiences as well.
Exactly. Lots of friends and lots of networking in New Zealand, So most of our guests are probably going to be from New Zealand. And again, this is the other category that I have, like what is tech engineering launch for me, which is I really want to break down and get into the psychology of being an engineer and being an engineering leader, because being a technical leader is quite different to the traditional leadership roles, right? So I really want to get into the psychology of it. And a part of it also means debunking what an engineering culture looks like for a startup, for a small scale organization, for a big scale organization, for a multinational company, that you just work remotely across the world. It's quite different, just like you're saying, James. Also, like when I talk about psychology, for me, I'm 70% introvert. So, and tech mostly is more introverted people. So again, and whereas like product and the business side is more extroverts. So the blanket rule doesn't apply to everyone. So for me, when I say psychology, I want to get into the introverts versus extrovert conversation and how that drives our behavior at work and how we approach to problems, right? Also diversity, diversity is something that I'm really passionate about, and not just like gender diversity, ethnic background diversity, but also like neurodiversity in tech. I think that is something we don't talk about, but given a lot of us are introverts, and over the years, I have worked with a lot of neurodiverse people, like colleagues. So I think that is something that I'm really, really keen to get into. Also, like how people say, bring your whole self to work. What does that mean? It's such a...
It's not always appropriate, right?
Exactly.
Because I'm a big believer in that when I was some art. And, how do you balance out that? And when's the right time to bring your whole self to work, and when should you not?
Exactly. And like all these big words that you hear nowadays, like empathy, openness, kindness, honesty, servant leadership, compassion, and action. Like, I just want to debunk, and this is the psychological aspect of like being an engineer or like building a culture, building an engineering culture, like what all of these things look like. And across different organizations, across startups, across big scale organizations. Also high performance, like what does a high performing engineer look like? Or what do high performing engineering teams look like? Or how does a high performance culture look like? For example, Spotify, let's explore that. And if that applies to us or would apply to other organizations,
Do you believe in the 10x developer?
Sorry, what's that? Do you believe it?
Have you heard of the 10x developer? Do you believe in the 10x developer?
10x developer? No, explain, please. What is a 10x developer?
Well, it's this idea that you can have one or two people in your team. So a 10x developer is someone that puts out 10 times the output of any other developer. They're a Superman. They're a machine. And there's a lot of stuff online saying you need to just put all your resources into finding this 10x developer for your team, and they're going to make you go, and you should treat them special. And then there's a lot of stuff online saying actually that person doesn't exist, and it's a myth, and those people are actually really hard to work with, and you should just focus on your regular engineers. It's an interesting conversation. I'm kind of my view is that the 10x developer is not something you should be chasing, but we'll come to that in the future.
It is so interesting that you mentioned that, because just in preparation for this episode, I was thinking about codependency at work, which is one of the topics that I also want to explore. And codependency at work could actually, like when you talk about 10x developer or someone who is quite a high-performing individual, when we have high-performing individuals in an organization, it doesn't leave any space for others to grow. Like that's been my personal experience. And I have been that individual, and I have been also on the other side where I have no space left to grow, because this person hogs everything. And this person constantly gets shout outs in time, and they're praised for everything, but that also means there is no opportunity left for anyone else to grow. So yeah, this is something, and what happens is now the team or the organization has become codependent on that person. And if that person leaves, the team falls, So
yep.
quite an interesting conversation for us to get into.
It reminds me of, and I don't want to, just for clarity, if you're not watching, this is kind of our 0 episode. This is our introduction to some of the stuff we're going to talk about. But that codependency reminds me of the Phoenix Project. I don't know if you've read it, Camy.
Yep. No, I haven't.
But it's, there's very much, spoiler alert, there's very much that sort of character in the book who's kind of, cemented themselves as the bottleneck, single source of information. It's definitely worth a read. My
Nice.
recommendation is don't read it while you're on holiday because it kind of makes you think about work too much.
Yep.
But it's a good book.
Nice one. The third category for me in Tech Engineering Lounge, which I think there's going to be a lot of crossover between the three categories that I have got, is the engineering leadership and management. And like I was saying, I think we were just talking before we hit record. Technical leadership is quite different. It's not your usual standard people management. Like what has you've just started your new role, engineering manager. Congrats on that, mate.
Well, thanks. I mean, it's a funny thing. So for context, I moved from a quality practice lead to an engineering manager role. To me, they're very, the job hasn't changed. It's a change of title. And I guess part of the reason we're having this conversation now, when we've started the Tech Engineering Lounge, is to talk through some of that stuff. Because, as you progress up a quality career ladder, eventually you end up sorting out organizational and people problems anyway. I'm interested that you say that the technical leadership is different from other types of leadership because in some ways it is, in other ways it isn't. I learned a lot of leadership skills from outside of tech, and some of those things are really applicable and some are not. But, that's again something that we'll probably dive into in another show. But I think it's a really interesting point, yeah.
Yeah. Like in my experience, it's technical leaders, like good technical leaders are hard to find. For me as an engineer, as a tester in the time, majority of my time, I'm just fighting against tools and technologies and the frameworks that we use at an organization, especially in big organizations, right? Like there is a way of doing things and it's quite hard to challenge the existing way. So because majority of my experience is in mobile, so I can talk about mobile applications, right? So mobile changes really fast. Like every couple of months, the technology has moved has moved forward. And the framework that we were using 6 months ago isn't fit for purpose now. And it will take another 6 months for a big or a large scale organization to onboard that tool. So for me to be able to work with someone as my reporting manager who explains what I'm trying to say, that really, really helps. Whereas if I'm trying to explain how my life is really hard right now in a particular situation because we're using legacy tools and applications to someone from a non-engineering background, that's quite a hard conversation. So yeah, that is something that we should probably talk about at some stage. It would be quite interesting to hear your point of view because now that you're actively in that role, so it would be also interesting to see how you transition from a quality practice lead to an engineering management. Engineering management, is it? Manager.
It is, yeah. And I hope I hope my answer is it's not that different, but we'll find out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, yep. Cool. So, I guess this is the engineering lounge. This is the Tech Engineering Lounge, should I say. And this is some of the stuff we're going to be talking about, some of the stuff we're going to be covering. We have a plan for sort of a season of 10 or so episodes, but, we're agile. Plans change. But ideally, we're going to be talking about a bunch of interesting stuff. We do want to hear back from people, though. If there are things about engineering culture that you want to hear about tech that you want to hear about, or points of view that you have, or, you feel like you have a strong opinion and you want to come and join us, then we want to hear from you. This will be going out as a podcast. We're on YouTube. We're going to be posting it on LinkedIn and on Twitter. So, engage with us. Let us know what you want to see. And we're more than happy to accept the challenges that you want us to talk about.
Yeah, and I would just add to that if it doesn't resonate with you, that's totally fine. Like James was saying when we started recording this thing, no one rule applies to all. So please take what resonates with you. If it doesn't resonate with you, that's totally cool. At the end of the day, we are just two random people talking about random stuff on the internet.
Yeah. I'm quite comfortable saying I'm not, any sort of expert, but I do enjoy talking about this stuff. I really, truly do. And I think part of the reason I wanted to sort of, fire this up, um, is that one of the things I really enjoy is seeing, people stretch themselves, ask these hard questions, learn and grow, and anything we can do to help do that for others is fulfilling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about. I think we've kind of gotten into this segment of our episode. Why should someone listen to our content, or why should people watch to our content? Um, for me, if you're in New Zealand, I think it's going to be quite interesting to follow us, because I don't think there's a lot of people in New Zealand, like from engineering background, or if there are, please let us know, because I'm not aware. So it will be quite interesting, because we're going to be talking about tech and engineering, how it looks like in New Zealand, New Zealand-based companies, the local market. So if you're in New Zealand, I think it's going to be quite interesting to see what we talk about and what we come up with, and the local people we bring on our show to talk about these things.
Yeah, if it's not clear, we're both based in New Zealand, and New Zealand's got a really interesting tech scene because we do quite a lot of innovative stuff here. And New Zealand's also really small in the scale of things. I mean, there's 5 million of us. It's not that small. But in tech in New Zealand, you're 2 degrees of separation away from anyone, which means how you behave and how you build your network is all really, really important. And there's lessons to be learned there, both within New Zealand and that I think are relevant to people, in the wider world as well. So come along, we'll talk about that stuff, and hopefully we impart some lessons, or maybe we'll learn something as well.
Yeah, for me, I think this is a big experiment about beating the imposter syndrome. And I say that because I am from a quality background, right? And quality engineering has become a thing, like maybe in the last 3 or 4 years. Before that, every time anyone talked about engineering, it's the traditional developer background. So for me, I think it's quite big to be able to talk about, like, being from a different background. Like, quality is usually treated as a second-class citizen across most of the organizations. I think with DevOps and build and run and CI/CD and all of that stuff, it has started becoming a first-class citizen, but it still is a second-class citizen. Testers, quality experts are treated as second-class citizens still. So for me, this is about beating that imposter syndrome and setting things right, for myself and for the community as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to say. I'm not sure I agree there are places where testers are treated as second-class citizens. I think those are places you avoid if you're in testing.
Exactly.
And, more and more people are starting to sort of grok that quality is important, and quality is not just the domain of someone else. We all own it, and more those lines between building software and testing software are being blurred. Some question the need for a testing specialist at all. And it's a fair question. It's an uncomfortable question, but it's a fair one, right? I have my own views about that as well, and I'm probably pretty biased given that that's my background. But it definitely does make for an interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah, also engineering is so much more than just writing code and testing it, right? And this is what I was saying, like one of the categories I want to explore as part of Tech Engineering Lounge is what engineering is. Like, there is so much effort that goes into getting a release out, and organizations have dedicated release engineers nowadays, platform teams that are just dedicated to set up the plumbing so that we can get the releases out the door, right? So there is so much more to engineering than just writing code, So
it's a really good point. My friend Dan from Conquer, he's the development manager, engineering manager there. He told me once about the distinction they make between a programmer and an engineer. We don't hire programmers, we don't hire developers, we hire engineers. They're different things because engineering is so much more than cutting code. And one of the challenges I've faced semi-recently is, how do you work with a programmer, someone who just wants to cut code and go home and have no consideration for some of the other stuff that goes around that. It's one of the biggest frustrations, actually, is dealing with that. Because maybe there's a place for it. Maybe there's people out there that just want to hire people who, they can give a set of requirements to and have some code come out the other end, and nothing wider than that. But for me, I think it's a much bigger job than that. I think it's much more interesting if it's bigger than that too.
Definitely similar, exactly same, like detail.
Yeah.
I think it would be also interesting, like if you're in tech, like me and James are just navigating through our career in tech, right? So if you are in tech, especially in New Zealand, I think it would be quite a nice place to navigate a career in tech together. So like James said, please do suggest us topics that you would like us to talk about. And I think between you and me, James, I think it's quite a good balance because gender diversity is something that's often very much talked about, and people often question their employers that they are not doing much towards gender diversity. And I personally have reached a point in my career where I am kind of tired of asking other people what they are doing about gender diversity. So starting this podcast is my way of putting myself out there and probably encouraging other females, to kind of like, if I can do it, maybe you can do it as well. And the same thing with the conference, like the NZTesting Conference that we've organized this year, where both you and I are speaking. When we first decided to organize the conference, Fabio and I decided that we wanted at least 50% female speakers. And we went out. It was really hard to find them, but we ended up with around 55 to 60% female speakers. And that's pretty amazing. So for me, this is big, like starting this podcast with you is quite big. And again, it's like diversity is so much more than just gender. Like I am what do you call? I'm an immigrant to New Zealand, So as an immigrant, it's been quite different than it would be for a native New Zealand, someone who was born and bred up in New Zealand. It would be quite different for them to navigate through a career in tech. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and it's something I'm passionate about, and I'm learning about all the time. There's constantly things I need to improve or think about. I'm really, as of the time of this recording, maybe a week or two ago now, but last week I went to a meetup hosted by Tanya Johnson from Aura. She's the head of product there, I think, about exactly that. The content was ethics and product management. There's a whole lot of content about, how we get women into engineering roles and what you're doing wrong if you're not doing that. It's really thought-provoking, really challenging stuff. I'm sure there'll be, if you look up the product tank meetup in Auckland, you'll hopefully be able to find the recording of that pretty soon, but absolutely worth your time.
Yeah. Like I was saying, I think majority of us point finger at the organizations that we work at, and I have done the same, and I constantly see people doing it right now. But I think more and more of us need to stand up and take personal responsibility for setting things right. So like I advise like some of my friends, like they talk about, hey, companies not hiring enough females. Actually, there are not enough females to be hired for, like I have been on the other side where you advertise an application for a senior programmer, and 98% of the applications are males, and in a lot of places, a lot of situations, they are way more qualified, so it becomes a balancing act. Like
there's things you can do, right?
Yes.
And again, we'll probably dive into this in deeper detail at some point, but is your job ad gendered, for example? Because often they are without realizing. You refer to engineer as him and he, without realizing that you're cutting out half of your applicants that way. Do you sit on your job until you have a diverse set of applicants? I've heard of that as a tactic, and I think that's really good. Keep the job ad open and don't start interviewing until you've got that diverse candidate pool. And that's something I just learned last week, really, is, how important that is. And it's okay to say, we're not going to interview anyone until we've got some women or some people of color or some non-binary people in this group. It's harder, and there's a lot more to unpack there. But if we're going to make positive change, we need to do some hard things.
Exactly. And conference is one of the ways how, like, me and Fabio and a lot of other people who are supporting us, we decided to start a grassroots movement, because I think diversity, gender diversity, we have to go back. We have to go back to grassroots movements. And in a lot of cases, as employees or as someone who doesn't own an organization, I think putting ourselves or making ourselves available to support grassroots movements that are trying to set things right is very important. So, like, that's where I stand right now. Like, I'm more involved in grassroots movement that support or encourage more gender diversity.
Yeah, I think the important thing with NZTesting Conference, and for context, NZTesting Conference is coming up. It's on the 1st of July. It's in Wellington. Get your tickets now, etc. But that sort of movement, and what I like about it is that it's Kiwi focused. We have other conferences. We have up until COVID, we had Test Bash New Zealand and We Test before that, which were excellent and will remain being excellent. The difference with NZTesting Conference is it's New Zealand focused, all New Zealand speakers, and will provide a bit of that, like you say, grassroots, what's going on at the lower levels. So I think will be quite interesting. Yeah.
Exactly. The conference is on 1st of July. So, and both you and I are speaking, along with a lot of other people, a lot of other local Kiwi heroes. And it's not just, it is called NZTesting Conference, but we have speakers all across the engineering space and technology space. So yeah, this podcast is actually getting long. We were only going to talk for like 15, 20 minutes, and we are already at 25-minute mark. Before we wrap this up, James, tell me why you are doing this. Why say yes to this endeavor, and why now?
Look, I'm big on, if an opportunity comes up, to take it, right? And, there's been a lull, I think, over COVID where people don't know what's happening, afraid to start things. And for me, I really want to be able to get stuck in and share some content. And I think, now is a good time to push something new, to get out there and start sharing. And just start engaging in the community a bit more, and let's do something. Let's talk about what's going on, and there's interesting things around remote working, for example. How's that changed the world? Let's figure it out, and as a community, I guess, figure out how we navigate it and make it better.
Yeah, interesting. Pretty much the same for me. Like, how, like, you have so many ideas, so many big ideas, but not all of those ideas can actually be converted into something that can be practical and applied at work. So for me, I've reached a stage, especially as a contractor, I've reached a space where I'm kind of like, I have all of these big ideas, but I really don't want to move into a leadership role right now, because I enjoy tools and technologies and being part of a development team way too much. I have tried leadership role before and I didn't quite like it. But I still have all these big ideas, what do I do with it? So I was like, starting a podcast would be pretty great.
One thing I encourage, when I do some coaching for testers on the side, or when I'm working with the testers in my team, or indeed engineers, is one thing you need to do, to grow your career, is actually start taking ideas and putting them beyond the borders of your organization, right? And that's what this is. As part of that is, okay, what are we doing? What do we want to do? How do we get that out into the world and start growing a bigger sphere of influence, I guess. Because it's important. It's important for the growth of yourself and your organization.
Exactly. And not every idea that we come up with is going to can be applied to the organization's way we work at, right? Because it's different. It's not quite the same thing. But, you never know. Some other organization, they might be in a stage where my idea might actually be more helpful to them. So someone else could actually use it. But anyways, I also want to say, like, anything that we talk about here are not the views of our employers. These are James and my views only.
Yeah.
Please. So please take everything with a grain of salt. Only take what resonates with you. And we are happy to hear your feedback. Anything else, James, before we wrap it up?
I think, look, this is just our, the way I see it this is episode 0. This is our origin story, right? I got bitten by a radioactive bug, and now I'm, engineering manager. I don't know how you sort of frame that, but this is just the start. And along with this, we'll be releasing our first episode, which will be much more sort of structured conversation around, some of the things we care about. Stay tuned. Send us, some feedback on what you want to hear about. We're both learning this as we go, but we really want to sort of build some community, build some engagement, and it's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Yeah,
it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. James, before we wrap up, you should also talk about JPy, because I really love JPy, and I'm pretty sure you have so many fans.
Look, it sounds so square. My wife doesn't get it at all, but I really do enjoy talking about testing. I enjoy talking about software quality. Subscribe to my newsletter. It comes out every 2 weeks on a Monday or a Tuesday, depending on how busy I am. And it's just all about things I'm learning about software, about testing, about how you build and grow your career. The address is jpy.nz, and there's a subscribe link there.
Yeah, and because this is episode 0,
right, so.
I thought you were great. This is not our first time we are podcasting. Both James and I've done this before. And there is so much we've learned. So, for me, this is again a big learning experiment. And everything I did wrong with my first podcast, I'm going to try to improve in this one. It was a lifestyle podcast, so probably not worth mentioning on this channel. But you should probably mention your podcast, James, because it's quite relevant.
Yeah, you may have come across the Super Testing Bros, which is me and my friend Dan. We did that for a little while as part of the Ministry of Testing. That was a couple of years ago now, and sort of I do owe a thank you to Dan for sort of putting me on to sort of doing some podcasting and sharing content this way in the first place, because it's definitely encouraging and so do go give that a listen if you like, but sure that the Tech Engineering Lounge is going to be new and fresh and exciting too.
Cool. Thanks, James. Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching our content on YouTube or listening to us. If you're listening to us, please like, share and subscribe, and we will see you guys very soon. Bye.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone.